Welcome, dear listeners, to the Carolina Haints podcast, brought to you by Wreak Havoc Productions and A Darker World. I'm your host, Dan Sellers. It's hard to believe with all the construction that's going on, seemingly everywhere, but North Carolina is known as the Good Road State. However, there are certain roads in this state where drivers should use caution when traveling. In Season 1 of Carolina Haints, we discuss Lydia's Bridge, where the ghost of a tragic car accident appears under a bridge in Jamestown, asking for a ride home, only to vanish once there. Next to Lydia's Bridge, Payne Road in Rural Hall is one of the best-known haunts of the Carolinas, even though it's actually Edwards Road. Whether Payne Road is haunted or not is a matter of debate, but it certainly is one of the state's creepiest roads. It's long and dark, lined with decaying buildings and littered with winding curves. There are numerous versions of the history of Payne Road. The first concerns a wealthy landowner named Edward Payne, or Payne Edwards, depending on who's telling the story. Payne built Payne Plantation, overlooking one of the valleys in the Rural Hall area. Payne owned many slaves and treated them with extreme brutality. He also had 4 daughters of whom he was extremely protective. So, as you might have imagined, he wasn't very pleased when his oldest, unwed daughter became pregnant. But when he found out that the father was one of his own slaves, he lost his frickin' mind. Literally. He cursed God himself and turned to devil worship. Of course, the next thing he did was savagely sacrifice his child's father to his newly found deity. But when he found out his youngest daughter was also consorting with slaves, he went on a maddening rampage. He murdered his family and set fire to the plantation, killing most of the slaves in the process. The second story tells of a 30s model Ford hot rod racing down Payne Road. When the driver got to a spot where the old Payne plantation stood, he lost control and crashed. As the bystanders rushed to the man's aid, the car burst into flames, slowly roasting the driver trapped inside. Drivers today sometimes report being followed by a car with round headlights, just like the old Fords. When they reach the spot where the man crashed, the ghost car vanishes from sight. Yet another story talks about a barn on Payne Road where the teenagers would go and make out. The owner of the barn was a Satan worshiper and would chase the kids out whenever he found them on his property. One night, after prom, 2 kids never returned home. Their parents called their friends and learned that they were out partying on Payne Road at the barn. The parents drove out to look in the barn, and there they found the teenagers hanging from the rafters, still in their formal attire. In a fourth version of the story, Edward Payne is not a plantation owner, but a simple farmer with 4 daughters. He didn't have a happy marriage, as he often argued with his wife. One night, after a particularly nasty fight, the man decided that the root of all his problems were his kids. He overpowered his wife in the living room and tied her to a chair. He then went upstairs and brought the oldest girl down. He told her to kiss her mother goodnight, and, as she leaned forward, he slit her throat with a large carving knife. His second and third daughters met the same fate. But when he brought down the youngest, infant daughter, he couldn't bring himself to cut her throat. Instead, he decided he would throw her in the well. The mother struggled and finally broke free of her restraints. She ran after them and snatched the baby from her husband's hands. They fought, and the man chopped the woman's head clean off with a knife, and then threw his daughter in the well. With the task done, he hung himself in the barn. I'm not sure about that version. It seems a little bit too much like a Violent Femme song to me. Claims about Payne Road are as numerous as the legends behind it. Some say that if you stop your car on the bridge beside the old house and turn the engine off, that it will not restart. Others claim that just driving over the bridge is enough to induce car troubles that linger far after visiting the bridge. It's also said that if you stand on the bridge and whistle Dixie, you will see the ghostly image of the farmer who hung himself there. Reports of orange orbs coming from the cemetery are somewhat common. Lesser claims of misty, ghostly figures and phantom dogs have also been heard. So which legend is the truth? Perhaps none of them. But there was, indeed, an old farmhouse that sat on one of the road's sharpest curves. And near this farmhouse, in the infamous bridge, is also an old cemetery. Was there really a plantation owner named Edward Payne? There aren't any records to indicate as much. Did a farmer really kill his family there? Doubtful. The old house that once stood there would be the type of farmhouse to match the story. But most people believe that this story was borrowed from the tragic 1929 Lawson family murders that happened only 5 miles away. But even if all the myths behind Payne Road are pure fantasy, the place has seen more than its fair share of documented deaths. Over the years, several people have been murdered in the area, including an alleged prostitute who was reportedly picked up from Winston-Salem by several young men in 1992. She was later found tied to a tree near the infamous farmhouse. She had been raped, tortured, and finally stabbed to death. Another well-documented case is the suicide of Milius Frank Edwards, who lived in the farmhouse in the mid-50s. Edwards had 4 other siblings, all of whom had committed suicide. One day, the 73-year-old man parked his truck by one of the sheds near the farmhouse and then proceeded to carry out the most dramatic suicides the Triad had ever seen. Edwards kept dynamite in that shed. He fetched himself a stick and climbed into the bed of the pickup. He then lit the stick of dynamite and placed it in his mouth. It's not that unusual for a rural area to have seen deaths over the years, but no one can deny the dramatic way that people have died on Payne Road. For many, this lends credence to the fact that the place is haunted, or even worse, cursed. Today, the old farmhouse has burnt to the ground and the original bridge replaced by a culvert. For more information about Payne Road, check out Michael Breedlove's article in the Winston-Salem Journal entitled Local Haunts, Twin City Ghost Tales from September 29, 2014. There's also Triad Hauntings, Ghost Stories from Winston-Salem, Greensboro, High Point, and the surrounding areas by Bert Calloway and Jennifer Fitzsimmons. You can also find articles at AmericanGhostStories.com, OnlyInYourState.com, and SouthernSpiritGuide.org. This episode was researched and written by Jeffrey Cochran and was hosted and produced by me, Dan Sellers. You can find everything that Jeff's up to at his company at adarkerworld.com And you can find everything that we're up to at our company at wreakhavocproductions.com. You can find us on Instagram at Wreak Havoc Productions, and I'm on Twitter at Hank vs. the Undead. You can email me with any thoughts or questions or concerns at wreakhavocproductions@gmail.com. Find out how you can contribute to our ongoing efforts on Patreon. Just check out patreon.com/wreakhavoc. Don't forget to check out our sister show, the Wreak Havoc Film Buffs Podcast, on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and YouTube. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. Tune in then to hear more about the things that go bump in the night.